Relations are concluded. Is there anybody else that have any conflict or pecuniary interest? Councillor Chapman? Okay, thank you very much. Just as we're rolling, make sure that everybody tries to remember their mic buttons and turn powering up their mic today, and so people can hear you properly. Moving on, we'll have the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I could entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented then. Councillor Lloyd, any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. And we're moving on to 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of May the 12th, 2020. Any errors, omissions, additions, deletions? Councillor Lloyd?
I just have a question. A motion 167.20, Councillor Holm made the motion and yet he voted against it. Am I reading that right?
Okay.
169.
Pardon me, Councillor Chapman?
What number was it again?
167.20, right top of the second page.
The Chair, just for clarity, so Councillor Lloyd, you are correct. It does read as you point out. Just for clarification, did Councillor Holm indeed make the motion and then vote against it, or was there an error in the recording of the minutes, just so we can get this accurately captured right now?
My memory's blank on this one. I know why I voted against it, but I don't remember whether I made the motion or not.
So we'll check back on the recording and just make sure we get that, the name of the councillor who sponsored the motion correct.
Okay. So subject to that being correct, can I get a motion to accept the minutes as presented then? And then if it needs adjustment, then we can bring them back to the next meeting if they're incorrect. Councillor moves that the minutes of that meeting be adopted as presented, and then with understanding that Lana would bring it forward to the next meeting if there was a different mover. Okay? Councillor White moves. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And item 4.1, we have a utility penalty cancellation update. Cam Mills is here to speak to that.
Thank you. At the March 30th, 2020 special council meeting, you'll recall council approved a reduction of non-payment charges for utilities from the typical 1.5%. Concessions was as part of a broader program of relief to residents and businesses as they struggle with the economic fallout of COVID-19, both from a profitability and income perspective as well as a cash flow management perspective, both which we highlighted at that time. The basic idea being that residents and businesses might be faced with a number of financial hurdles at this time, and eliminating late payment fees, the town could alleviate some of the stress on an individual or business in terms of their short-term financial decision making. Because of the nature of utility payments and the relatively short timeline, there's not a significant amount of data at this time to clearly analyze uptake of the program with what could be coined as significant statistical relevance. However, the data that does exist shows that generally speaking, there hasn't been a significant usage of the program at the time that the report was prepared. So we provided a table showing various billing dates. So May 1st, 2020, so that would be the most recent, as well as the previous month in April and March, as well as May and April of the previous year. And what I've provided for you here is each percentage represents the percentage of the overall billing that resides within that column. So 0 to 30 being current, 31 to 60 being 1 month behind, and so on and so forth. And what we found is in looking at May relative to April, there is certainly an uptick in the amount of folks that are now 1 month behind, moving from 9.6% up to 11.6%. However, what's also clear is that 11.6% is still within the range of what is typical with respect to utility bill payments. So it's difficult to say with any sort of precision whether that increase was due to a need for this program or whether that increase was just a sort of a statistical bounce back to normal values, which leaves us in a position where if we're going to consider extending the program, there's fundamentally two ways to consider this data, and both of them are reasonable realistically. So on the one hand, because that value that's a month behind isn't something like 25%, for example, where there was massive uptake of the program, it could be argued that because the uptake for the program has not been significant, the program is not effectively achieving its desired goal or is fundamentally not necessary, and therefore warrants not continuing past the June billing date as per the original approval. Alternatively, it's reasonable to suggest that the financial impact that we're seeing from this crisis hasn't necessarily caught up to a lot of people at this time. They might have recently been laid off. They might still have savings in place. So bill payments are still happening. And given the low uptake of the program, it hasn't really cost us too much. So failure to collect on that 1 month, that 1 month of bills that weren't paid fundamentally cost the town about $700, which isn't a substantial sum from our perspective. So you could argue that given that the economy is likely to continue to contract for the foreseeable future, it's reasonable to extend the program in order to provide residents with the opportunity to take advantage of it should they have need. We haven't done formal engagement with respect to this program. The timing of it doesn't really allow for that. However, we have discussed it generally, and for the most part, the feedback I've received in discussing the program with individuals is that they appreciate its existence, whether or not people are taking us up on it. They certainly appreciate the fact that the town, at the very least, made the gesture to acknowledge the difficulty that people are facing. So, provided a recommendation, and the recommendation really is grounded in the fact that my role is with respect to economic and community development. So from my perspective, given the low cost of the program, my suggestion is that the program be continued for an additional 3 months. However, I'll leave that up to council to make that decision.
For your presentation, I'll open the floor up to council if they have any questions. Councilor Chapman.
Worship, and thank you, Cam, for this report. I appreciate it. This really helps me in terms of deliberating moving forward. Just a question to you: the tax deferral will still continue to September 30th. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The tax deferral that was put into place moved the tax payment due date, if you will, from June 30th to September 30th. So that is a separate matter that isn't affected by this. This was specific to that second piece of the puzzle, if you will, with respect to simply to utility payments.
In that case, I'll speak in support of number 1, that council extend the approved reduction of late payment penalties on utilities for July, August, and September. And maybe subsequent to that, that you'll provide a report back to council on that.
That would make sense.
Okay, so Councilor Chapman, that's in the form of a motion that you move approval of recommendation number 1. Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Councilor Chapman. Any discussion? Okay, I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you. And we have 4.2, pool operations update.
Do we want to go to the delegations perhaps first? This one might have some discussion, so.
Delegation, item 5.1, St. Andrews Fire Academy. Welcome, Chief. The floor is yours whenever you're ready. You can introduce yourself and your guest. And
So this is Dylan. He's one of our students that just went through the first year of the Fire Academy. So he wanted to come talk to council today a little bit about how the first year went, give a report from the student perspective, and also talk a little bit about the community grant application that they had just applied for. So I'll turn it over to Dylan.
Well, hello. I'm Dylan Sturgeon. Again, I am part of the St. Andrews Fire Academy. It's honestly a blast to be there. I'm glad I can. And it's nice to meet all of you. So you may be asking, what is Fire Academy? So it's a 2-year program that allows high school students to get a medical first responder certificate and the National Fire Protection Association certificate. There's a lot of things that go into it. First, we start off with basic life support in the class. You just learn your CPR and how to open up patient's airway, just basic stuff. Then we moved on to the trauma life support. And this is how you're going to provide life-saving treatment to people to prevent, death from occurring or any more trauma. And you also learn what their mechanism of injury is and how to treat that. So you get on scene, you find out what's wrong, and you just treat that injury, and you're trying your best to just get them patched up into that ambulance and gone to the hospital straight away. Then after that, we moved on to the incident command system. This is an organization part of, when you go to an incident that is really big. It allows for organization in everything so that everyone is going to follow a role. You're going to report to your officer pretty much who's controlling your section, and they will report to the higher ups, and so on and so on. So this, again, like I said, just gonna go and organize everything so nothing's chaotic. After that, we moved on to the medical first responder course. This is the hardest part of Fire Academy. I was not really prepared. I'm just like, oh, I actually have to study for things. I thought, this was gonna be super easy. And if it wasn't for Kevin, hounding on us to get things done and actually work, we would have not passed, that's for sure. So in the medical first responder course, we learn about the anatomy and physiology of the human. We learn about pharmacology, what medications medical first responders are able to give and how to administer them. We learn what to do in a medical emergency. And also we take care of, I can never say this word, sorry. Elderly people, adults, children, and infants and little guys. And we also, which is pretty cool, I didn't know that medical first responders could do this. We learned how to deliver a baby, and let's just say I was quite surprised that that can come out of a female. And next year, so that's the first year, that's what happened. And then next year we're moving on to the National Fire Protection 1001 Firefighting Level 1 course. This will learn about the fire service history, what firefighters wear, and we'll learn the behaviors of fires and how to get, just learn how to eliminate them the proper way and all that. We also learn how to do structural searches in vehicles, buildings, and in a forest or something. So that's honestly really cool. I'm most excited for the National Fire Protection part of Fire Academy. It's what got me really wanting to be in this course, that's for sure. And yeah. So in June 24th, 2019 was orientation. This, I was late to this orientation. I was like 30 minutes late because I completely forgot. I got a text message from one of the teachers, and she's like, "Yo, are you coming?" And I'm just like, "Oh crap." So I booked it running all the way to the fire hall, and I walk in there late. Everyone's just staring at me. I'm just like, "Oh, hey." And I was really excited. I was really disappointed that I showed up late. And Kevin, he, showed us what we'll be doing and all that. And then he showed us around the fire hall. I love being at the fire hall. I wish I could go there every single day, but school comes first. So. And then we moved on to September, the first week of September, pretty much. That's when school started up. Our classes were on Friday after school at 1:30, and we just got the overview of what we'll be doing this year, and then we just started basically right then and there. We started our first class and started the unit. It was crazy. There was people there that I didn't know. I thought it was just going to be everyone just from my school, but no. I met 4 great people there, and I can say they're my good friends now, and I'm glad I was able to do that class with them, and hopefully they are here next year. And so I was extremely nervous, and I didn't want to mess up anything. I wanted to be the perfect student, and Kevin for sure can say I wasn't the perfect student. But yeah, that's how that went. It was really nerve-wracking, and once a month went by, we're all comfortable with each other, just moved on. We started going through the basic life support unit really quickly. So, Fire Academy is a dual credit course. This allows students to gain credits for high school and post-secondary level. It allows high school students to experience what post-secondary is like before they graduate, which I thought was really cool. And surprising, everyone's like, oh, college or university is hard. It's really not. Just put time in, study, and you will get it done. Our goal is to allow students to explore potential career options. We also want more people in Coaldale, in the Coaldale community, that have the training to assist people who need it. Our major goal is to make Coaldale even safer than it already is. Our plans for next year is to start our fire training. We're going to purchase more personnel protective equipment for future students, and if we get the community grant accepted. The first year of Fire Academy, again, like I say, very nerve-wracking, wasn't prepared. We had about a total of 108 class hours, and I think Kevin did the math, and there was like 1,296 hours per student if you added them all if you multiplied it all together. And so what we did the first year was we completed the heart and stroke first aid and basic life support, the Incident Command System 100, International Trauma Life Support and Basic Provider, and then the NATE Medical First Responder course. It was quite a fright. Honestly, easiest one was basic life support. Other than that, it started getting really tough. The trauma life support, it was going really easy, and then it came to the final exam for that one. And I didn't really prepare myself for that one. Took the test, and I'm just like, well, that's not the mark I wanted. So I was able to redo it and get a better mark, which I'm so thankful for. And then I put myself like, that's when I noticed I needed to actually put time into this and get things done. And so I worked hard for it. And if wasn't for Kevin and Parker, Colby, and who was there was two more, I think. Jasmine and Tim? Yeah, if it wasn't for them, you know, helping us out when needed, I don't think any of us would have been motivated to keep going. So what we're thinking for next year is we want to make sure we're fundraising, we can get some sponsors, and again, have that community grant accepted. And all this just so we can keep Fire Academy going, because I love this. I want future students to keep doing this. I want this to happen. Just because having a lot of medical personnel in a town is going to help out a lot. Because if a disaster happens, guess what? Everyone can pretty much help out. And what's going to happen is the Kate Andrews Fire Academy, we're going to volunteer our time to hopefully adopt the Coaldale off-leash dog park, and we'll be cleaning that like every single week, making sure it's spotless. Like you can literally eat dinner off of it. And it's a huge benefit to the town. Like I said, more medically trained personnel to help our community, and it also helps the fire department since you take this course, once you turn 18, you can volunteer to become a firefighter here. All you need to do, pass the interview and the physical exam. So for the community grant, we're asking for $10,000 to go towards our personal protective equipment for next year, because that stuff is extremely expensive. And we want to raise money for the fire training portion and ongoing operation at the Fire Academy. Thank you guys for your time, and hopefully you consider. And if you have questions, feel free to ask.
Up in Town Council, I want to thank you, Dylan, for coming and being able to present. I'm sure that was your penance for being late on orientation day. So now you're square with the department and whatnot, but it's your honesty and candor about the course, and your experience was very good, and you echo exactly what council was hoping to get out of supporting the fire academy, the excitement and enthusiasm that it generates to future firefighters and that. So I think I'll open the floor if anybody on council wants to ask you a question. Okay, you got off lucky. But I look forward to hearing about your second year, and hopefully it all comes together well. And that, Chief, do you want to add anything, or?
No, I think you covered everything pretty well, so, yeah, thanks for your time, thanks for having me here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your very entertaining presentation. Okay, and then we have a second delegation, item 5.2, and we have Peter Casarella from South Grove, and he is joined by Cam Mills. Welcome, Peter.
Testing.
Yeah, it's working if the light's
Awesome.
on.
I don't have a play-by-play PowerPoint today. I sent a giant pile of documents for your reference. That's way too much to go through point by point, so I'm going to give an overview of some of the documents that I sent to give you an update on what we've been working on pertaining to the COVID-19 crisis, and a few other points pertaining to the general economic situation, and some things for Coaldale specifically to think about. So thank you all for having me. My name is Peter Casarella. We've all met before. It's be here with you today. So I wanted to give you an update on what South Grove has been working on with respect to the economic recovery in the region. So when this all hit, everybody was scrambling. We all went through that period, and it was a little bit of a gong show. And when we started to sit down and look at what we could do as an economic development organization for the region to help with the recovery, we realized that it was way out of our capacity to tackle this problem alone. But part of our mandate is to build partnerships, and we have successfully done that. So we sat down with Economic Development Lethbridge, which is a large shop with much more resources than we have, and the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, and the partners started piling on quickly. And the South Grove Board approved a partnership with these other partners in the region to work together on economic recovery for us. So we kind of built the plane in the air as we went. We had a lot of theory, because a lot of us have taken courses on economic recovery in a crisis. We'd never got a chance to put it to use, thankfully. And in the first few weeks, it was chaotic, I won't lie. But the first thing to do was to make sure that we got a centralized spot up and running that everybody could go to in order to see exactly what was available, because things were changing rapidly. So we got those websites up. South Grove put up a website where everything was located. EDL put up a website, and we shared information, and we funneled everybody towards that. The next was an actual person on the other end of the phone to be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody to demystify everything, because as all of you know, and I know, dealing with the government on paperwork is an absolute nightmare. And what may seem simple for somebody who lives in it every single day is completely and totally foreign territory in another language for somebody who only has to deal with government paperwork once or twice a year. So we got the hotline up and running there. And so anybody in the entire region, whether they're an employee or an employer, can pick up the phone. They can call that hotline, and they're piped through to one of us or one of the staff that we employ in order to talk to somebody who lives and breathes this stuff on a daily basis, to get a referral to the right spot, or to get direct help finding the information they need to apply to a program to help them out, or figuring out what their options are. The next thing was to get experts to help people out. And we managed to secure those experts from all of the different organizations in the region who volunteered their time. I'm talking about places like Stringham LLP, which volunteered their lawyers' time to talk to people. Different recruitment offices to talk about HR issues with employers or employees, to talk to people about actual recruiting and retraining and reskilling for the new economy. Also financial advisors available from places like MNP over in Lethbridge as well. So anybody in the entire region, whether it's Lomond or Coaldale or Lethbridge, can sit down and talk to an expert for free, donated time, about their specific situation and issues. And that has probably been the biggest value we've been able to provide to the entire region so far, because every single success story of getting through this crisis adds up to create a holistic picture of how well we're going to get through this together. Now, looking down the road, we're trying to put in place now things that are going to help us in the long term to recover from this. So that's one of the areas that I'm working on, and Cam's working on another stream that's kind of related to that too, looking at what the municipalities can do to support people. I've got several of the other regional EDOs working with me on a committee, looking at workforce retention and getting our people back to work in the long run. So number one, we got out recommendations to all the communities with specific examples of what you could do within the bounds of your capacity. If you're going to do something, here's recommended economic development professional to-do lists that you can tackle, and I know the team here has taken up that banner as well. And we also got set up a market data. We're trying to put together a holistic, what's the word, good word for it? I'm trying to build a capacity matching and import replacement program on the backs of the idea that if we can support our employers with getting their workforces back to full capacity, we're supporting employees getting back to work. We're trying to land the grants for that right now, and we've got a pretty good shot at it. And that would be basically looking at so places that have lost a lot of their business, either from the collapse in the oil market or because of the COVID-19 crisis, and identifying, okay, what are your industrial and service capacities, and can we pair you with another business or industry in the region which needs those capacities? Or have you been importing products or services in the past to run your industry that can be replaced with capacities that exist in the region? This is economic development best practice. We've always wanted to do it, but we've never been able to do it before, either because we to do it or vice versa. But now the grants exist and the imperative exists to get our people back to work that we might be able to pull this off. So that's what we're working on right now with the Economic Recovery Task Force. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. We've been trying to plug people into the mental health supports that exist in the region. Most of that is just referral. And there actually will be a one-stop shop location, physical location, once social distancing measures are lifted, that people can set up appointments at and go to and sit down in person with all of those advisors. The University of Lethbridge has donated space in the Penny Building in downtown Lethbridge to the initiative. And so anybody in the region can set up an appointment and go and access those services. In terms of the economic situation, so in April, the national economy lost 2 million jobs. Now that's actually good news, because it's a lot better than most economists were predicting when this whole thing started unfolding. They were predicting situations where we're going to lose 4 to 5 million jobs, and it was only 2 million. And southern Alberta, we saw our unemployment rate, which is in the Lethbridge Medicine Hat region, soar to 6.8%. Which once again is actually good news, because it's a lot better than most areas of the provinces were experiencing even before the COVID-19 crisis hit. So southern Alberta's strong economic fundamentals continue to be strong. But those numbers don't really tell the whole story. We're a small population, and so when we say that we have lost 7,600 jobs in April in the region, 7,600 jobs is a lot. Now, a lot of those jobs, thankfully, the majority of them were part-time positions that came from things like the service and retail sectors. And when I say that that's good news, it's because those jobs don't have a heavy economic impact by comparison. On the flip side of the coin, we lost something like 1,300 jobs in the education sector, which have a high economic impact. That's a lot of income that's not coming home to families and being spent in our communities across the region as well. So we definitely do have some challenges ahead of us, but we have advantages too. Now, having said all this, the fundamentals that make living in Coaldale and make your community in particular have a really bright future have not changed. The biggest threat to the Canadian economy is global trade disruption, because we are an exporting country. We're a small population that's highly advanced technologically and industrially, sitting on a massive resource base, and we export those resources or the products we make from them to the rest of the world, and a very hungry world, which is getting increasingly richer and wants access to the high quality products and foods that we make. Now, southern Alberta is a microcosm of Canada as a whole. We're a large geographic area with a very small population that has a very intensive resource base. We produce a ton of primary resources and a huge variety of primary resources. I'm talking about the variety of crops we produce here. And because we produce this huge variety of crops, it's the perfect place, along with our growing conditions, to do food production. Not just primary food production, but putting ingredients together to create end user products. Those fundamentals have not changed. And frankly, for the next 100 years, when everything I read looking out, it's not going to change. The biggest disruption we could see is from something like geopolitical disruption like global war, but hopefully even that is just temporary. So Southern Alberta remains positioned really, really well. And then you add things like the energy transition that we're going through on top of that with our local renewable energy resources and expertise. It's a good place to be. And Coaldale in particular, your geography is your absolute best friend. So if Southern Alberta is one of the best places to produce the commodities and products that have global demand striking at them for the next 100 years out, then Highway 3 is the best place within Southern Alberta to produce those resources. And if Lethbridge is the primary service center for that entire region and consequently has the highest costs, then communities that are right outside the largest labor pool are going to be in the most advantageous position going forward. Now, why am I saying this? All of our communities are going through really an unprecedented crisis, at least in my lifetime. The last time I've heard about crisis like this was in the late 70s, early 80s when I was busy figuring out where my shoes were. So while we are going through this crisis, the advice that people like me give to people like you is the way to get through this is not to look at the short term. You got to think, what decisions can I make today that will put my community in the best possible spot 10 years from now, 20 years from now? The long-term outlook, not at the end of my council term, not at the end of 2 years, not even just at the end of this crisis. And the implication of that is, if you have projects planned which will support the growth of your local economy, which supports the growth of your quality of life and the maintenance of the quality of life of your people, because that's why we're all here, maintaining and improving the quality of life of the people we serve, right? And you can make those projects still happen in the midst of this crisis. You're money ahead 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road to do those projects. It's tempting to sit back and turtle and to play it very safe and conservatively. And you know your books, I don't. But if you can do these projects and continue to build the infrastructure that drives economic growth and keeps the quality of life of your people high and improving, my message is to do it, to take the bold step. But once again, I don't know your books and I don't have to answer for it, so take my advice with that grain of salt. Aside from that, other advice for you today is continue to use the task force. You participate in South Grow because you believe that we're all stronger when we work together. And the task force has undertaken this work for you. So I send out information to CAMS a couple times a week, updates on what's happening in the COVID-19 crisis, and he circulates it out through your communities. Continue to leverage your volunteers and your networks to get that information. Once again, individual success stories. The more people we connect with the resources we're providing and get them to the other side of this crisis, that's one more success story and one more person who's better off. Invest in the infrastructure, as I just mentioned. And if I could put a personal request to all of you, which is very dear to my heart, and I know it's dear to Bill's heart too, if you're having conversations with your MLAs, if you have the chance, if you have 5 minutes in your day to pick up the phone and call your MLA or anybody else you know in Edmonton, push Highway 3. There's a brighter chance than probably any other time in the history of the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association to get some serious and significant action on that corridor. And that is infrastructure which will drive economic growth 10 years, 20 years down the line. Exactly what we were just talking about as well. That is a very worthwhile project to push if you can. And that is my request to you today. I'm happy to take questions on anything South Grow is up to or anything pertaining to the crisis and what we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions through to our presenter, Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. The one question I have is how are we getting this information to each and every single business out there?
So the Coaldale Chamber is on our mailing list. We push the information out to them. The best that I can do from my desk, where I am the one employee of South Grow, is push the information as far as possible. So it does go to the town staff, and I know that Coaldale and Kaylin and the other team, they do push it out as well. I see posts getting repeated and resent out as well. So thank you guys for that.
So we're short of mic, so we're going to share. Yeah, so our strategy with respect to that has been to basically provide this communication through all of our available channels. So we've got, as Peter mentioned, social media, website, things like that. We also try to make sure to include this type of information when we can in the various mailouts we produce. We've got utility mailouts, for example, the newsletter. We've had some opportunities to be in the local paper, for example, as well. So we're just trying to blast as much of this information out as we can, as regularly as we can. The difficulty we have with respect to that is that there is substantial information and it changes frequently. And we only have so much, I guess my perspective on it is that we only have so much license to disrupt the lives of, for example, our business owners. So I don't want to call every business owner every day to tell them about the existence of a website. They're busy. So our focus, as much on providing the information specifically, is rather to let people know that the information exists and that we're here to help them and to encourage them to reach out to us or to reach out to these various organizations to get more of it, rather than trying to explain everything that comes down the pipe constantly, because at a certain point people are going to stop paying attention to us. So it's about finding that balance has been our approach.
We do also have paid advertising throughout the region, which is being paid for by the task force funding. Yeah, it's social media mostly, so targeted social media. If you own a business, you're likely to see one of our ads pop up.
Councillor Lloyd has a question.
Because we're so dependent on agriculture here, how is this affecting the farmers? Are they going to continue on with the same crops as they've had before, or is there going to be a market for them? What's going on there?
There's been temporary disruptions. You've heard about the potato industry, for example, taking a big nosedive off a cliff because a lot of their end markets are restaurants, and restaurants are shut down. The big question will be is how long these disruptions last for. I anticipate that they will be short-lived. By next summer, we'll be back up and running at full capacity with everything. It's hard to see there being long-term disruptions because there is already competition in the commodity broker markets for the crops that we produce. I have commodity brokers calling me fairly regularly saying, where can I find this, where can I find that, where can I find this? The global demand for raw product is not going anywhere, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So we might have a bad year or two, but people got to eat.
Thank you, Peter. Any further questions? Councillor Chapman?
Worship, and thank you, Peter and Cam, for your presentation. This region of Alberta has been indicated by Rachel Harder, our Member of Parliament, as really the superpower in agriculture. And I'd hope that we can certainly harness that philosophy or that position. And I appreciate your comments on the Highway 3 twinning project, because I think that will certainly build the economy. It'll be the nucleus for the economy and how it can affect every community in the south here. I was really impressed with your report here on that you're sharing with us here today, and I think some of the other comments that I have noted to late was the University of Lethbridge particularly expressing the fact that they're going to be changing their model of education to some degree, and Trevor Lewington is quoted to say that 71% of that education base will be lost due to the model changing. So part-time jobs, full-time jobs will be affected, restaurants, rent, and entertainment, all the sorts of things that students bring to the table along with their education. So in that light, I'd hope that the people that we have here can be harnessed in other fashions and other manners, and I'm hoping that Coaldale can also be as an attractive place to do business as anywhere. And with that, the one question I do have with your report here, as much as you talk about being regional, is I sense through the report here that there certainly was a fairly strong emphasis on Lethbridge itself. And to what manner is Lethbridge and South Grove kind of interconnected in that way?
You bet. The branding is not what I would have picked if I was in charge of picking the branding. We were in a position where they started this initiative and then they invited us in. And our board decided, you know what, we preach that we're in this together all the time. We preach that results matter and that all the rest of the fluff doesn't matter as much. So if we have to swallow it and have it be called the Lethbridge Region Economic Task Force, whatever, that's fine. If we're able to help our people out with resources that we can't provide on our own, we'll swallow that and take it. I mean, there's been a complicated relationship between Lethbridge and the region over the years that you all are very privy to. And in some areas where you have to collaborate together, things don't go very smoothly. My entire experience in the world of economic development has been that we get along really well with Economic Development Lethbridge, which is a nonprofit that provides services to the city of Lethbridge. They have been a very good partner to us. They've invested heavily in the region with city dollars and city taxpayer dollars, particularly in areas like renewable energy, where nobody's going to put up a wind farm or a solar farm within the limits of the city of Lethbridge. They will never collect business taxation off of that. But all of the effort they've put into that initiative since 2007 has helped us land things like the 500 megawatt farm up in Vulcan County that's helping that county survive the abandonment of their oil and gas revenues and keep alive their tax base and keep alive services for their people, and all of the other projects too. They've invested heavily and been a leader on the Canada's Premier Food Corridor initiative that I sit on an advisor as, and credit is secondary.
With that comment, make sure you do convey our sincere gratitude back to the people that initiated this effort. And like you say, I think that there's really no borders to what the benefits will be, and you can't. I think we'll all share by the collective work and wisdom that is going to be generated by your efforts and the collaborative efforts of the initiative that you just described. Councillor Holm, do you have anything? Pardon me? Okay. You put on your recording button. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll thank Peter and Cam for their presentation. And while we're at it, I wouldn't mind a motion to receive 5.1 and 5.2 for information. Councillor Chapman, all in favor? Okay. So, all right. So now we'll go back up to 4.2 and Cameron.
I'm just going to steal my microphone back here. So we wanted to take the opportunity about what type of facility was appropriate with respect to pool infrastructure here in the town. At that point, we did decide to go ahead with repairs to that facility to give us a reasonable short-term time frame to get some more use out of that facility while we made some longer-term decisions. And I've been pleased with my discussions with our Director of Public Works to note that our fix has been fundamentally completed. I understand they're in the testing phase at this point. So that would provide for the pool to be open during the regular pool season. Of course, that has not been the case due to the public health measures in effect as a response of COVID-19. What we wanted to discuss with council was putting together a plan or a statement with respect to how the town of Coaldale should approach the possibility of opening the existing pool should that be allowed at some point this summer, based on what we understand from the province and the provincial guidelines which we are required to adhere to. We looked at the issue, and the report provides basically, fundamentally, we've looked at it from three key factors. First is from an operational perspective, second from a financial perspective, and then also consideration of how some other municipalities in the region have approached the issue. With respect to the question of opening the pool from an operational perspective, one of the things that needs to be understood is that there's a fairly significant amount of complexity in terms of what is required in order to open that particular facility. So one of the things we've been dealing with respect to public health measures is that there isn't necessarily a great deal of lead time provided to us from the province when they make a change with respect to what our requirements to meet are going to be. I sort of joked about the playground opening happening at sort of the end of the day on a Friday, for example, coming from the province, and we quickly turned around and addressed that particular issue. But one of the challenges here is that pools have been identified as being part of what is described as phase 3 of the province's relaunch strategy. And we don't have a clear date at which we will arrive as a province at phase 3 of the relaunch. And we also don't know that there won't be a certain amount of shuffling between phases. But generally speaking, the discussion we've had with folks at the province and folks higher up within that decision-making capacity is that the likelihood of phase 3 is to be probably at the very earliest mid-July, probably very early August as a reasonable guess for when that's going to arrive. With respect to, and where that creates some difficulty is with respect to opening the pool, there is a certain amount of complexity involved, as I mentioned, in doing that. So for example, we have to hire, assuming the pool opens in its traditional manner, in traditional capacity, and provides the same services that it would typically provide. We hire 12 positions, all of them certified lifeguards. That includes 1 manager, 1 assistant manager, and 2 shift supervisors. All of these positions need to be filled by people who have a very specific type of training. We need to do interviewing and posting for those positions. Typically, that's done over a period of about 2 months. We figure that if we needed to accomplish it very, very quickly, we could probably do so in a period of about 3 to 4 weeks, but probably not any quicker than that. The reason that creates some difficulty is that if the 3rd phase, for example, is reached, for example, on August 1st, and we're given best case scenario 4 weeks of lead time to lead up to August 1st, in that time, we would then be able to get the pool up and running theoretically for August 1st, which would only allow us to open the pool for a period of 1 month. The more likely scenario for if an August 1st launch were to occur is that we would receive a shorter period of time in order to do that, and then we wouldn't be able necessarily to have the pool open for phase 3 of the relaunch. We would be 1 to 3 weeks delayed based on how much time we had to do that. So it creates a certain challenge for us with respect to communication and messaging, especially with folks in the town that are dealing with their own issues. They don't necessarily have as much of an appreciation of that complexity and what's involved in getting something like that open. And I can foresee certain challenges associated with not being able to meet a quick turnaround of an expectation for opening a facility like that. It does pose some challenges to us operationally. From a financial perspective, we know that the pool as a general operating item for the town is something that operates at a loss for the town. Generally speaking, when the pool is open for a year, we receive a net operating loss of around $200,000, and that accommodates for the $67,000 approximate dollars in revenues we receive between swimming lessons and pool passes and that sort of thing. It's difficult to say exactly what the savings would be associated with not opening the pool for a given year, but we have calculated that the savings would be approximately $50,000, given that we could eliminate those variable costs associated with the part-time hires and also some of the chemical and utility costs associated with opening the pool. There are a number of fixed costs that are in place that, given that the pool we're simply looking at it for a single year, can't really be adjusted for at this time, that factor into that $200,000 value. So with respect to the approach that other municipalities have taken with this issue, we've done some mining of our network, if you will, to see where other municipalities are sitting on this issue. And we've heard from approximately 10 other municipalities in the region that have already made the decision to choose not to reopen these facilities this year, regardless of when Phase 3 is arrived at. McGrath, Blackfalds, and Medicine Hat are listed in the report as being amongst those 10 municipalities, but again, there are others. And we do expect that number to increase between the May 7th when we search for this information and currently. So what we're asking council to consider is whether or not we should consider opening the pool this year if possible, or whether or not we want to make a decision in advance to say that given all the circumstances associated with it, that we're going to move forward with keeping the pool closed this year and prepare to open next year. The second issue for council's consideration is with respect to long-term plan development for a new pool facility. So at the 2019 regular meeting of council, a motion was passed directing administration first to repair the pool, which has been done, as well as to prepare for the public input required in order to make a decision on a longer-term facility investment prior to December of 2020. So that the plan initially was to begin a round of public consultations in June of 2020, and as you know, public opinions on this particular issue tend to be strong and tend to be quite divided. And the best way to approach public input on this issue is to allow for sort of deep, meaningful conversation on the issue so that we can address the complexity of it. That is rendered very difficult in this particular era of or time of social distancing. So there are three principal factors which we've listed that impede our ability to follow our projected timeline. First, responding to the COVID-19 crisis has required the diversion of staff resources that would have been directed to that public input towards other activities. Second, the ability to interact with the public in a meaningful way, as I discussed, has been impacted by these physical distancing measures. And third, the substantial difficulty in the financial reality between now and the period when this previous engagement was made leads to the question of how valid the sort of first phase of the consultation that we received is. As you recall, some of the items that we were discussing with folks included some very major expenses that would have risen, and we discussed the possibility of tax increases on the hundreds of dollars per year to accommodate those. And it's reasonable to suggest that folks who may have been in support of those types of initiatives may be having second thoughts about that. So I would suggest that strictly from that sort of academic look at the data, the value of the data, given the dramatic shift in so many people's lives, is probably less than it was, which makes the second round of consultation that much more critical. So given the difficulty associated with robust consultation, administration is faced with, combined with the need to deal with other emerging issues and the uncertainty both for the town as well as residents and businesses in terms of their longer-term financial reality, we might consider it prudent to consider postponing plans for the further planning of the pool facility for an additional year. So that would leave us having a goal of having a plan in place by December of 2021. At that point, I'll leave it up to council for questions.
Cameron, for your very comprehensive report. I'll open the floor up to members of council for any questions. Our CAO wants to add a supplemental, perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just further to Cam's report, one of the other moving targets is even if pools are allowed to open, we're not sure under what restrictions or conditions or their capacity limits. So when you're trying to look at forecasting what the financial impact will be of opening or not opening, it's also going to depend on what conditions of opening are attached to an opening. Is there a capacity limit? Because you have to have a certain number of staff, whether you have one customer or 100 customers. And so having the expenses and the overhead followed by perhaps truncated revenue based on conditions is also going to impact your potential projected deficit for whatever period of time that the pool would be open for. So just something to put out there is that we still don't even know if it opens, under what conditions will it be operated.
Thank you. And just to speak to Kaylin's point, thank you, Kaylin. I had intended to cover that. The other difficulty associated with that is that it's unlikely, from my perspective, given the history of the last 2 months, that we're going to receive significant detailed information weeks and weeks in advance of the potential opening. So it's going to just be another challenge where we're faced, not only are we faced with that challenge, but we're also faced with it in likely a very short period of time.
Thank you, Your Worship. With that being said, you being our contact for Mr. Grant Hunter, I would like a letter being sent about the delay and knowledge about information given out. I know many businesses with stage 1 now are not opening because they got the information so late. So this is an important thing that we're discussing because there's no information and it's not given until the very, very last second. And I would like the Alberta government to know that that's a struggle for the businesses that are trying to open and also for us trying to run a community.
Councillor Holm?
Your
I struggle with this one. I would very much like to see administration go ahead and advertise for lifeguards, et cetera, with the advertisement put in place that you're only going to be hired if the pool can actually be opened. Given all the things that have happened, I know last week when Friday afternoon, we finally get an announcement that playgrounds can be open. The number of kids in my neighborhood that flocked over to Jenny Emery School and others with a big smile on their face was pretty important to a lot of the parents in our neighborhood. I think opening a pool would also be really important to parents and our community as a whole. So I personally would like to see us be prepared to open as soon as we possibly can when the announcement is made. And if that means we hold interviews and we tell people that, yes, you will be hired if it's open, and if we have to have a list of 14 or 16 people on the list, knowing that some may get jobs in between times and won't be coming, so be it. But I think we need to move forward to prepare for that. As far as the loss on this, we already passed a budget. And in that budget that we passed just a couple months ago, we budgeted for $150,000 to $200,000 loss in the pool. So that isn't an impact on the budget that we've already passed. So I, for one, would be very much in favor of opening the pool as soon as we are told we can do so.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you. Is this a decision we have to make today? Would 2 weeks make any difference? Because things are changing daily. Would we have more information in 2 weeks at the next meeting?
I'm honestly not sure. Maybe. Like, from the provincial perspective, I can't say. From our own operational perspective, I suppose there are some things we could look into, but I think the real key is the question of, you know, how much advance notice are we going to have from the province, and when are things going to come? Yeah, so that would be the difficult issue for us, and like I say, we have absolutely no control, unfortunately. So,
Keelan?
Through the chair, in response to Councillor Lloyd's question, we're trying to be proactive. That's why you're having this item before you in May. There is a bit of a time buffer built into when we first bring this to council. It would be fine. Like our council meeting in June is June 8th, so in early June. That would be something that if you wanted to wait it out a bit longer, that we could have something before council, perhaps if the desire, the majority of council is to open it no matter what. If that's more the position of council, then what we could do then at the June 8th meeting is have more of a fine-tuned opening logistical follow-up, if that's the desire of the majority of council. But we do have a little bit of time. That's why we're here in May, just to get this topic broached, because this is probably the single biggest facility opening discussion, followed by the arena, but that doesn't typically open till end of August, early September. So this is the big time critical one.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Cam and Kalen, as well, for your, I think, in-depth research into this. I support your proposal. I guess my question would be in term with following Kalen's thoughts there is, I guess for the person on the street that's really wanting, or the homeowner that wants to let their kids go and play in the pool, I think we need to have the science behind us to understand fully what the dynamics of entering a pool would be, and, you know, all the other aspects to, you know, cleanliness both in the dressing rooms and in the pool area, sanitizing, all that, little chlorine, and all that, all those chemicals satisfy Alberta health standards in terms of allowing people into a public pool where you literally share the same water.
Keelan?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, those are some really good points there. As I said, we're not really sure if pools, when they are allowed to be open, under what circumstances. So you may have hundreds of kids that would like to use the pool, but we may have to look at a sequencing strategy where this is only X number per hour, this is your hour, have a bit of a wristband monitoring system. The other thing is, like, our lifeguards, they're not in charge of what happens in change rooms. Like, they don't stay in a change room all day in a pool. Like, they'll check to make sure that supplies are stocked up, but this is an opportunity for people to gather. So logistically, there may be kind of a, if the desire is to open, then there may be some adaptations to how we provide this service, just full disclosure, where there could be a supply and demand issue, and we won't know to what extent there will be until we get a little bit more further guidance. So I'm just letting council know that if we want to save the day for a month, it's possible, but it could be under very different circumstances than we've been accustomed to in previous years. And it's all really going to depend on what the restrictions or conditions of operation are going to be. When it comes to the operation of the pool, the chemicals operating with health code, we are on target to have the first week of June, to have the pool fired up with the contractor that just rebuilt the system. And our staff are going to be there for an orientation on the new system. So mechanically, we're okay. Where the choke point perhaps could be is in what the restrictions of operation are relative to number of patrons, if that distinction makes sense.
Councilman Pauls?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Lifeguards, have you got a list of them? Like, do we have a list of lifeguards kind of in the making? Like, can you keep on touch? Because if we can't get any lifeguards, we can't open, right? So that would be the end of it. So if these people need to get a job and they get a different job and they're gone, I just wonder if we shouldn't be keeping in touch with possible people.
Yeah, so this hiring is done through our Community Services Department, and I know Cindy, has a relationship with Cindy and Caitlin, I should say, have relationships with the previous people that have been in these posts. Generally speaking, they indicate whether their intention is to come back the next year. The difficulty, of course, here with these people is to say, usually they're employed for the entire period of time, so they might go do something else, and then the question is, do they want to leave that job on August 1st to come work for us, assuming that phase 3 never moves backwards to phase 2 in the middle of August, for example, or all the rest of it. So it's certainly a challenge. And if that's something we're going to do to move forward with the goal of keeping the pool open, then yeah, that's probably part of the work that needs to be done. And that's additional work that we'll have to take on administratively to prepare, for sure.
I agree that we should be as ready as possible and do a possible opening if we at all possible can. I think it's really important. I think the disease is mostly with the older people, and I think we're punishing the young people by not letting them, have a pool or whatever else. To me, I would think we should make every effort to keep open when we can.
We've already discussed a minute ago by Councilor Simpson is the notification period and the preparation time and that. If you could have certainty on how the plan going forward, that makes life a lot easier. And I don't think that there is an abundance of information on what it looks like to open a pool like ours, and what all safety measures would be taken, and do we have to maybe retrofit the change rooms? Would you have to have enough time to install plexiglass barriers between areas where people are changing? There's a number of nuances to this kind of a facility. Naturally, going into the water is probably the easiest part, but the process of changing and the whole utilization of the facility, lying on the grass and sun tanning or full enjoyment. It's really very early days and very little information out there to really tell us what it would really look like. my mic, sorry about the mic, but I said a lot of really good things, but too bad you missed it all. But, you know, I wouldn't be supportive of making too much preparations right now, but I might be convinced that we could table this discussion until the June 8th meeting, and if we have substantially more information, that we can feel more at ease about a decision, then I entertain it then. But if we have to make a decision on opening the pool tonight, I would certainly not be in support of it with the lack of clarity and information.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of bringing forward the issue tonight was to recognize the complexity associated with this particular task. It's not simply turn on the lights, open the gates, let people in. There is an operational difficulty associated with opening the pool at the best of times. There is a lot of lack of information with respect to what an opening would look like, would it occur, both from a cost and a staffing perspective. Then there is also the question of, what is the point where we would potentially reach, if we could open the pool on August 28th for one weekend in advance of closing it, does that make sense? We've talked about August 1st, but the reality is we have no idea when Phase 3 is going to arrive. So there are a number of challenges. There's certainly no serious administrative issue associated with coming to a decision in early June. That was why we wanted to get ahead of this and start discussing it now, because it is not appropriately discussed in mid-July. So I would be perfectly comfortable continuing the discussion if council feels that they need more time for consideration of it.
And through to Cam, there's actually two. Do you have any idea as to what their positions are, other than a simple write-off at 1 month of having a pool open, and Councillor Halsey's questions about hiring staff and that, and having them around for 1 month, how there's a number of moving points there.
Councillor, I can't speak to every municipality. I'll speak to one in particular that I spoke with, and I'm not going to perhaps name the municipality, but in speaking to staff from there, the fundamental discussion, as I understand it, related to that particular municipality's financial position, recognizing that they had an initial budget, and they do, like everyone else, take a pretty substantial loss on the pool as part of their operation. And they felt that the savings associated with closing were going to be directed to the programs that they'd put in place, the penalty cancellations and the utility deferrals, as well as, reducing, the planned increase in the mill rate, reducing or eliminating that. So their budget had changed substantially from what had been passed the previous fall, and they felt that some savings from not opening the pool were, was appropriate for that in their particular case. But that's their financial position. Every municipality needs to consider that for themselves.
Refer it to the June 8th meeting?
Yeah, you can, you're entitled to make whatever motion you would like.
I'll make that motion, please.
Okay. So, you want to defer the decision on the pool opening until June 8th?
Right, right.
Councilor Lloyd moves that we defer the decision on the pool opening until June 8th. Is there any discussion? Councilor Hall?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to vote against that because I would really like to make a decision so that we are prepared to move forward if we need to. By leaving this another 2 weeks, that's 2 more weeks of administration not having an opportunity to plan for a potential opening. I would like to see that planning done as soon as we possibly can, so I will be voting against this.
Any other discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, we have Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Simpson, and Avery, and myself in favor and opposed. Councillor Holm, Councillor Falls. Okay, and with respect to the public engagement piece, I would support the recommendation number 3 if anybody wants to make a motion relative to that. Councillor Simpson? Councillor Simpson, you sponsor recommendation number 3 to defer the public engagement piece until December 21st?
Yes, I do.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And I just want you to know that the value of this thing is cracking over. Well, you were right, that item 6.1 might stimulate some discussion.
Your worship, I would like to make a motion, if you don't mind, sending a letter to Grant Hunter, asking that more clarification is given at an appropriate time for matters of relaunch.
Okay. Councillor Simpson moves that we send a letter to our MLA with regards to proper notification of phasing in the recovery of the economy, etc.
And it might be a good thing to note in the letter, just saying that we're having a pool discussion, so if we have any information before June 8th from him, would be appreciated.
Okay. We have a motion by Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Then we have item 6.1, private pool bylaw revisions. Cameron, you've been busy.
About pools, so here we are. This particular item does not have to do with the town's pool facility, rather it is with respect to the governance of private pool facilities within the town of Coaldale. So currently, the town has a private swimming pool bylaw, bylaw 658, which was originally adopted in 1976. And this bylaw provides regulation pertaining to the installation of private swimming pools in the town of Coaldale. Provide a report with respect to that. What we're fundamentally looking at here, if I may, is a question of overlapping regulation and trying to create a certain efficiency with respect to the governing of this particular issue in the town. Right now, when you say want to put a pool in your backyard, you're governed by the town of Coaldale's land use bylaw, which for an in-ground pool will have regulations with respect to where on the parcel such a facility could be located. So you can't have the pool, for example, right up against the property line. It has to meet setback requirements in line with what's required for an accessory building. So that's covered by the land use bylaw. It isn't covered by this particular bylaw. This bylaw relates more to issues of safety, and those issues are largely covered through the Safety Codes Act, which is administered through safety codes agencies. So in the town of Coaldale, Superior Safety Codes currently takes care of that particular issue. Where we find that there's an issue is that for the most part, the overlap is fairly seamless. So there is, for example, a regulation in our bylaw that says that you must have a fence that is 6 feet in height around your parcel, basically to ensure that people aren't, easily accessing the pool from off-site and what have you, which is a perfectly reasonable goal. However, things change over time, and the reality is, from a planning and development department perspective, we don't deal with private pool installation very often. And so as pool technologies change and as the provincial regulations with respect to safety codes change, which happens fairly frequently, we don't necessarily deal with this issue, and so these types of bylaws tend to fall behind. So one issue, for example, that this bylaw doesn't cover is that the safety codes regulation requires either the fence at that 6-foot height or a safety cover which can be installed. These safety covers are relatively new technology. I have some experience with them. They are a cover that, for example, you put in a code, it slides out, it locks. You can walk on this cover. They'll hold up to 900 pounds. They will hold my weight, which is a reasonable weight, as I understand it. I can walk on it. It is perfectly safe. So it really wouldn't matter if the fence around a property that had one of these covers had a 6-foot fence or not. You're not getting into the pool unless you know the secret code to open that particular device. And the struggle we have is that when we get development permit questions that come in, we look to the bylaw. We don't necessarily go through 40 years worth of older bylaws that are passed. We're not familiar with something like this, and we certainly don't have enough expertise in-house to notice every time some particular safety innovation comes in place with pools to come back to you and update that bylaw. So from my perspective, the regulations that are in place that are provided by the province are sufficient to manage the safety of private pool installation in town, and having an additional bylaw on top of that creates potentially another hoop to jump through that is perhaps doesn't achieve much, and perhaps can fall behind a little bit with respect to what makes the most sense for these types of situations. So our recommendation is to fundamentally revoke the bylaw 658 and simply rely on the provincial regulations to govern safety with respect to pools in the town. That's an approach that's taken by a substantial number of municipalities, including Lethbridge, for example, where they simply rely on the provincial regulations to govern that sort of thing.
Cameron, and when we're writing our letter to Minister Hunter, he'll be pleased to note that we're working on red tape reduction as well. You maybe make that part of the introductory of our initial letter. I would support what you put forward, that's for sure. Councillor Chapman?
I would, but
You move to adopt the staff recommendation to rescind bylaw 658?
yes, and further that
Provincial regulations exist. They supersede our regulations. Simply right now, you have to meet both, and we're suggesting the provincial regulations alone are substantial. Yeah.
Okay. All right, and any discussion? Okay, I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Okay, and we're on item number 7.1, RFQ results, pathways and Main Street. Dustin Yankee, come on down. You're the next contestant. Okay, welcome, Dustin. The floor is yours.
Part is to give a summary of the two tenders we just closed recently, Main Street revitalization being the first one, and our Phase 1 pathway being the other. Starting off Main Street, the tender package and design were both prepared by MPE Engineering. We posted it to the Alberta Purchasing Connection on April 21st, 2020, and it closed on May 14th, 2020. And the Phase 1 pathways design we did in-house. That was posted on APC on April 23rd with the closing date of May 14th. Just well, on May 14th, that day that they closed, we did an official closed tender opening in office because it was an evaluated tender. We didn't do an open tender to the public. At that meeting was Mayor Kim Craig, Councillor Bill Chapman, CAO Kalen Hastings, Director of Infrastructure Andrea Kester, and myself, Dustin Yankee. We received 4 submissions for each project, and I'll get into both of them, just following here. So starting off with Main Street, we received bids from Dennis Dirtworks, McNally Contractors, Tollstrip Construction, and Whistle Contracting. After reviewing all of them, Tollstrip was given the highest score out of the evaluation criteria that was listed in the tender. Their bid price was $2.4 million, including a 10% contingency while excluding GST. On top of the costs for construction, there's also consulting fees. We had to build a soil containing site for, we did a geotech assessment on Main Street, and there's supposedly a lot of hydrocarbons in the soil as a result of the testing, most likely from old gas stations that have been in the area. So to follow Alberta environment specifications, we have to treat that material as it comes out. So that's what the purpose of that site. It's located by the lagoons. In addition to the cost for that, new Fortis streetlights is exclusive of the contract, as well as many street level amenities such as benches, bike racks, tree grates, garbages, and wayfinding signage. We ordered those outside of the contract just to try and mitigate upcharges by the contractor, and it makes it easier because we can choose directly what we want to get and avoid any delays with shipping. This is just a summary of the cost that I just went over. So $2.42 million for the construction bid price, and consulting came at $384,900. That included structural assessments completed by MPE as well. So we went into the buildings on Main Street just to see what kind of condition they're in, to ensure that any damage that was documented prior to construction we could compare to after construction to make sure the contractor didn't compact the ground and crack any walls and anything like that. Quality assurance, quality control, so that's just basically testing of the materials, so sieve analysis and compaction testing for construction. And then the construction of the contaminated handling site, the street lights. Part of that street light cost is also, had to put in an extra pole to maintain the street lights to stay on during construction. Basically, the way it works is they're fed from where we're starting construction, so once they start to take them down, to avoid having all of the lights down Main Street shut off, we tried to mitigate that by putting in an extra pole, and then that feeds the rest of the poles up until we get to that point, basically. And then the street level amenities came at $110,000, and we're still finalizing some of the details with that. Getting onto the pathways, we had 4 bids for that as well, from East Butte Contracting out of Picture Butte, DeGraff Excavating, Tollstrip Construction, and McNally Contractors. This was also an evaluated tender, so there were scoring criteria that was reviewed internally. Tollstrip was given the highest score. They had a construction price of $599,000. This also included a 10% contingency while excluding GST. Other costs that will likely come up for this is we want to do some additional landscaping, as well as replace the stairs at the 13th Street, right by the SMRD trash rack, as well as include some benches and garbage receptacles along the trails. And we're currently working on retaining final pricing from Tollstrip for this work, so there'll be a little bit of a buffer there, but it should be fairly close. And that's the final of my report. Open the floor to any questions.
Dustin? Councillor Holm?
For information. Thanks, Dustin.
Okay, any discussion to Councillor Holm's motion to receive for information? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Yes, carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Dustin. Okay. And we're on 7.2, you can send in the next, Spencer and Clayton, okay? And thank you. Spencer Groyle and Clayton Ruttenberg here to present 7.2 COVID-19 Recovery Plan and Facility Reopening Update. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to you and Council. As you just mentioned, we'll be covering the... Just going to go ahead and mute that. We're going to go ahead and cover the Municipal Recovery Plan, and then Clayton will take over for the What's Open in Coaldale and a brief discussion about those elements. So as Council is aware, Lana, if you could bring up the recovery plan itself. Sure. So as Council's aware, the town, as is the case with every other municipality across the province and very likely every other municipality across the country, every provincial government and the federal government themselves makes use of a system called the Incident Command System to respond to events such as the COVID-19 situation. A key part of that framework is recovery itself as a part of the response that each level of government would take to this type of event. And so with that being the case, we've seen other municipalities, and we're also preparing our own municipal recovery plan that basically outlines what steps we have taken, where we are now, and what steps we will be taking to achieve recovery, whatever that may look like in this particular event. One thing I should mention right off the bat is that in this particular case especially, recovery isn't it's not this document, the recovery plan isn't a fix-all. It's not something that we look to solve all the problems that COVID are. If we go to the next page, Len, our role at the municipal level is always the 4 pillars of recovery and really of any response to ensure the safety of people, the economy, the environment, and the reconstruction of our community and the region post-event. In this particular case, there isn't really anything that I'm aware of that's happened to the environment or the physical built environment that would require reconstruction. So rather, we focus our efforts on our people and our economy. And this is a timely matter to come before Council this evening because you've already heard quite a bit about how we've undertaken economic recovery in the region and at our local level. And I have to say I'm proud to be a part of the team that's done the work in that regard. Of course, that is all upheld by the decisions that Council's made up to this point to defer certain payments and help the community in the ways that they can. Go to the next page. Oh, sorry, back again. And again. So if you scroll down from there are 2 more pages. Okay, so I've covered our role. We'll cover the last page here, what recovery looks like in Coaldale. And again, that's fairly straightforward in the sense that we don't necessarily know what that looks like yet because the event is ever changing and presenting us with new challenges. So very simply, the way that that's been captured at this point is recovery is a Coaldale that's stabilized and adjusted to regain a sense of normalcy within the context of what are considered to be safe public health practices determined by Alberta Health Services and the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health. And if we look at the 4 stages of recovery that we have on the screen and in the document, we have planning, which means in our municipal emergency plan, we have a section on recovery that we've based this document largely on. The second step would be short-term. The step after that is midterm recovery, and then the ultimate final step is long-term recovery, getting back to whatever future normal looks like. I would say it's safe to consider that we're somewhere between short-term and midterm recovery. And again, this is a point-in-time document that's meant to capture the steps that we are able to take and that we have been taking and that we will be taking to continue assisting the community in the region with whatever it is that we can to help recovery along. I'm going to turn it over to Clayton now to discuss more specifically what that means in terms of our facilities and work that we've been doing to prepare for things like the reopening of parks and playgrounds, for instance. So I thank you for your time. I'm happy to take questions now, or if you so wish, we can leave them until after Clayton's presented as well.
It's done.
Okay, and again, just a big thank you to Spencer and his team. We appointed Spencer as the recovery manager for COVID quite early on so that his team could start to a lot of that economic and recovery for our people as well. And they've spent a lot of time putting a lot of this stuff together too. But just looking at the what's open in Coaldale section, we kind of broke down some of our facilities to make it a little more clear to people what's open when, based on the province's guidelines that they have in place right now. So the prior to May 14th, as well as the stage 1, is kind of all rolled into that page 1 with our town office, the fire hall being partially operational, not open for our public tours and that type of stuff. The dog parks and our paths and walkways that have kind of either been open throughout or opened up as of May 14th. Phase 1 on the next page there. The museum, the community center, our playgrounds and amenities, the kin picnic shelter and the quads, being able to fall largely under our outdoor recreation, or some of those facilities being able to fall under some of the restrictions that have been put out by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Phase 2 and 3, which is still yet to come, and not sure exactly when those are going to happen, but including the hub and the public, the library is in phase 2, and then leading into the final phase in phase 3 with the rink sportsplex, spray park, and the swimming pool. Obviously, at this time, we still have restrictions listed as unknown, as we might not know exactly what restrictions might be in play at that time. And then, Lana, if you just go to the next thing there as well. Spencer also just put in here the signage that was created for the playgrounds that lines up with the majority of the stuff that has been put out by Alberta Health with their guidelines in regards to playgrounds and recreation as well. I think that's it.
Spencer and Clayton, I noticed that we had a couple of inquiries about Eastview Gate Park and some activities there. Is there any update on pickleball, for example? Is that in phase 3, or is that something that?
Yeah, I believe Cam Mills, who's acting as our liaison, was communicating with them and was sending them their guidelines for operation, which is basically the copy of the guidelines that came from Alberta Health that's posted on theirs for outdoor recreation. So I believe he's engaged with them. I think as of Friday, they should have heard back from him.
Any other questions through to Cam or Clayton? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Spencer and Clayton for this very comprehensive report that gives a lot of clarity as to your steps forward. Just a comment and a question. A comment being that the museum had a meeting last week, and I think because of the fact that their visitors they predict them to be really down this year, it really didn't merit having them stay open, so they're going to evaluate this situation in mid-June and then possibly open in July. So that'd be my comment. My question about playgrounds in particular, Is the public aware about the usage of playgrounds and so people come and go, and of course there isn't any sanitizing process to, following a usage. Is there anything that the public needs to know in terms of player beware sort of a thing, or how is
We
that?
did post the signs up so that before people do use it, they do at least get that information. They've been pushing it out through the social media as well to hopefully pre-educate people, to make sure you're bringing hand sanitizer and that type of stuff so that you can sanitize after.
Again, gentlemen, for your presentation, and I'll entertain a motion to receive the presentation for information. Councillor Pauls, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, and then you can let Kyle know that we're on his item. Okay, we're on 7.3, Support for Asset Management Grant Program, and Kyle Beauchamp is here to address this item.
Good evening. So in front of you is a report detailing the new offering for the FCM Municipal Asset Management Program, the MAP grant that they're offering. This grant is up to $50,000 for municipalities, in which the grant will cover 80% of total eligible costs. The grant program is funded through the federal government. Previously in 2017-2018, the town had received one of these grants that were used towards software upgrades related to our financial costing. So again, this grant is concerning asset management in the town's implementation of our asset management program. A current couple of examples of the current work we're doing. Corporate Service Department right now is working towards a work order financial costing module. Updating this, organizing it, will allow us to better true cost some of the town facilities and operational services going forward. This is part of the funding we received from the previous grant that we used to acquire the software. Second example of steps that are currently in place, the town's infrastructure master plan, which is in the final stage of completion. This will be a critical piece to the asset management program going forward. Part of this grant, council must provide a motion supporting commitment to the grant going forward. If the town of Collier was accepted for this grant program, we would break the activities out into 3 sections. The first one would be training, largely for staff and council. Second would be organizational governance and development of this grant, such thing as a policy, a roadmap, how to introduce and use asset management. And the third one is implementation, so getting the actual product off the ground once the legwork is done. So should the town be a recipient of this grant, the town would be required to fund a minimum of 20% of the eligible costs. So come out to $12,500 for a $50,000 grant. These funds, should the town receive it, would be able to be covered within our current operational budget. In addition to this, the town would also have to fund ineligible costs such as staff time for training and implementation. Again, so this isn't a new expense. This is just simply an allocation of current resources from one project to a little more towards this grant. In combination with both these eligible and ineligible costs, it's estimated that the town's commitment would be equal to the grant of $50,000. So furthermore, there'd be a total of $100,000 invested into this program. Again, so we're looking for council support for the administration to apply for this grant and support in these activities going forward should the town of Colville receive this grant from FCM as part of our asset management program. I will turn this back to council for any questions they may have.
Thank you, Kyle. Is there any questions through to administration? Councillor Chapman?
I'll make the recommendation that we apply for the grant. Okay, so I'll make that one motion.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chapman moves the staff recommendation that includes all three bullet points there, as shown on the screen. Councillor Avery, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. So where is the $50,000 coming from the budget? Is this unbudgeted money? Is this new monies, or is this monies that's been allocated for this? It's not clear.
So the ineligible cost, the 37.5, that is staff time and resources that would be implemented towards this. So that's already a budgeted item. There's no new funding for that. For example, that would be largely work from our finance manager. He would be his work directed towards that. The second one, the 12,500, would be new funds that we can fit within our existing operational budget, but they would be new funds that would be required to obtain the $50,000. So from that perspective, it's a good trade-off to, if you put in 12 grand, you could possibly get 50 in new funds from that. So only the 12,500 would be new funds from a cash perspective.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, so we have Councillor Chapman's motion on the floor, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Avery? Thank you. And then we're at item 7.4, and as stated earlier, I have a conflict with this item, so I'd entertain a motion to pass the chair from myself to Deputy Mayor Simpson. Councillor Avery, all in favor? Okay.
Of information, that would be a non-pecuniary conflict of interest with respect to one of the applicants, so it's not a pecuniary conflict.
Okay, thank you, Council. So I am presenting today 8 applications for the community grant that we have received for 2020. This is the 4th year that the Town of Coaldale Community Grant Initiative has accepted applications for community projects. In the past 3 years, the community grant funding has contributed over $111,000 to worthy projects. This year, $35,000 of available funds could be allocated to eligible projects from the community grant funding stream. Applications for the 2020 community grant funding were open for submission until May 6th, 2020. Criteria for eligibility included not-for-profit or volunteer-based organization that operates within the Town of Coaldale or that portion of Lethbridge County included within the response areas identified within the Joint Town-County Fire Services Agreement. Must include programs, projects, or events that contribute to the social well-being of the community, address a community need, and enhance or improve the quality of life for residents of the Town of Coaldale, and a completed application package, including requested supporting documentation, must have been received by the deadline. It should also be noted that applications are not considered for groups of a political nature, for-profit organizations or commercial entities, individual persons, school boards, and provincial or federal bodies. This year, 8 applications were received with the requested funding amount totaling over $58,000. All applications are included in your package. So I would like to ask Council to award the requested funds as indicated or amended as Council sees fit, and that Council pass a special resolution to include applications that are not eligible if Council finds merit in these projects, or that Council direct administration to investigate amendments as they see fit. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Is there any questions for Cindy? No.
Would you like to go through each application individually, Cindy, or do you want to go as omnibus or whatever the word may be?
Whatever Council prefers.
I guess with my question with regards to Gem of the West, I think this is an appropriate time, being as that this is going to be a harder year for them in terms of their, especially their fundraising side for the society. Speaking in favor of their application, my questions are both regarding R.I. Baker and Jenny Emery. They're not the school board, they would be function of the school that's be applying?
The applications, that would be up to interpretation. The applications were submitted by teachers, by staff, so.
Okay.
So do you guys want to go through each one separately and see where we want to sit? Is that good with you guys, or Councillor Avery?
Sure, thank you. Just off the top, like, the Kate Andrews High School graduation committee, the $1,000. Can we take that out, take the $1,000 from our council money? Because I think this is something that's fairly important council support with the school year these grade 12 students have had. And we're not going to the conference this year, so let's take our money and give it to the graduating class. So, you know, I know this is a smaller amount on here, but it takes that and then it shows council support for our graduating students. And we should reach out to the other Christian school in town that has graduated classes as well.
We could save that for a motion till the end and then go through the rest each right now. Okay. So we'll start with the Cold-Down District firefighters. So it's for $10,000. Is everybody seeing the full 10,000 or is people seeing different? Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you. Do we have to pare down? Can we accept them all? Because they're allowing
only have
35, but
35,000.
there's quite a bit more than that asked for. So can we approve the whole thing? How does that work? We have to stick with the 35,000?
That's what-
35 is your maximum, yes. That's the funds that are available. Yeah. So you can either fund in total or partial, whatever you see fit.
Councillor Holm?
You, Grant. Okay, so if I had my choice on this, the senior center, I would reduce it to $2,317. By doing that, I'm eliminating the handy ride, I'm eliminating coffee and cookies, and I'm eliminating advertising. I believe that those should be duties of that group and should not be funded by outside sources. The other two is that I would eliminate completely is the Jenny Emery School and the the Kate Andrews High School, R.I. Baker Middle School. The 10,500 and the 10,000. I don't think either one of those, in the way I read how this community grant program is supposed to be put forward, I don't think either one of those fit. I believe that both of those should be funded through Alberta Education and not through this community grant program. Thank you.
So if we just start with Cold-Down District firefighters, is everybody good with the 10,000?
Did they receive funding last year
Yes, they did. They received 10,000 last year.
and the year before that?
I can't answer that right off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry, through the chair, this direction now to Councillor Avery. There have been consecutive years with which they've received funding. One was from the grant, one was through a different reserve from council. So yes, but not from this program.
Okay, for quick show of hands, who's good for the 10,000 for the Cold-Down District firefighters? So we have 3? So, and then 3 not. So both your two, what number would you give them?
It's not that I'm against it, but when you look at a $270,000 project and you're giving them 10,000, where's the other 260 coming from? Can this sit in our bank for another year rather than their bank account for a year. I'm not speaking against it, it's when you're looking, big project, it's not going to be used this year.
Good point.
Sorry. So we'll leave that one for the end. Now, we'll go on to the Coldell Seniors Advisory Committee. I actually was on the same guideline as what Councillor Holm had said. So all in favor for who wants the full amount of the 4,100? Raise your hand.
Catch up here.
1,
Oh, I'm in favor of the.
2. Okay, so for the remainder that were no, or do you guys agree with Councillor Holmes' suggestion? Yes? Okay, so then we'll go Coldell Seniors Advisory for 2,317.
Just a minute, though. I'm trying to look for their page. The those are in-kind donations, so those monies are not. No, they're in kind. Because the
Sandy, Cindy, sorry. I
For the
apologize
handy
about
ride
that.
and for the coffee snacks, yes, that is cash. The bottom section of that application, where it's got volunteer hours and that is in kind, but the top, I think 4 or 5 items, it is for cash, yes.
because the Handy Ride Association for one.
So-
Well, I wasn't aware of that, so so that's why when I saw this was basically all in-kind dollars that they weren't actually getting or being subsidized or having to pay out.
Yeah. Up until this point, the Handy Ride has been providing, they would provide it, and
okay.
McDonald's has been donating.
Okay.
So they wanted to start paying that instead of going after, going for that, the free aspect from these two organizations.
So there was 4 of us that agreed on the 2,317, so we'll proceed to the Coldell Copperheads request of 10,000 for the transportation. Who will vote on the full 10,000 unless there's any comments prior to that? Who would like to give the Coldell Copperheads 10,000 for Councillor Avery?
Thank you. Again, did they receive monies last year?
They had to, I don't believe they did, but it was after.
Okay, thank you.
That
year
their
before.
sign, right, or their
Yeah, but they
their
had
board?
requested it, but then council had sent it back that they needed to come up with the portion of it or half of it.
That's correct. Sorry, just one last point. Council conditionally gave them $10,000 for the score clock on the condition that there be fundraising or contribution from other groups. Because it was a conditional motion, the conditions weren't met, so the funds technically weren't released, if that follows.
Okay, so who's in favor of the Coldell Copperheads 10,000? No? Yeah? Okay, we're all in favor with that. So then we'll go on to the Gem of the West Museum for their $2,500 for the purchase of clothing, display, forms, or exhibits. Does anybody have any questions or comments before? Councillor Chapman, your mic's on, so I wasn't too sure. Okay, so who's in favor of the $2,500? Okay, and who's opposed? Councillor Avery, are you opposed? You're in favor, okay. Okay, so we'll go on to the Jenny Emery Elementary of 10,500 for their learning commons. Councillor Holm gave comment on it earlier. Is there any other people that would like to comment on it?
Just maybe a comment through to Cindy. So this is not the school board so this would be a. The other thing is in their application, I just went to their website, and their website is offering the same products for 25% less across the board. So I don't know if they know that, and whether the 10,500 is including shipping and all that. So on the website, being that it was 25% off on the initial cost of the item, the shipping would be up to 15%. So obviously then that'd be a difference of 10%.
Who would all be in favor of the full amount of 10,500 for Jenny Emery? Is anybody in favor of a reduced amount? Councillor Lloyd?
I'm not opposed to it or anything, but we have to cut out $20,000, so we have to decide where we're going to cut. That's a tough decision.
I know personally myself, with Jenny Emery and R.I. Baker, if you put them together kind of as one, because they're both similar, asking for the same amount, if I would be in favor of giving them 5,000 each, or half amount of what they've requested.
This is a crazy.
Councillor Holm, or sorry, Councillor Pauls?
I'd like to go home. I don't agree with this because this should be a school board or the teachers, whatever, you know. This is not in, everybody else has to struggle to get this money. And these guys here fart around with that money all the time. They could just, I just don't agree with it. There.
Pauls. Who would be in favor of giving them 50% of the requested? So it'd be 10,250 for Jenny Emery and 5,000 for R.I. Baker. Is anybody in favor of that? Well, we haven't gone through them all yet. We haven't gone through them all yet. Do you guys want to put them off to the side? Okay. So Kate Andrews High School Graduation Committee, and we'll also approach the Coldell Christian School for the 1,000 from the counselor's portion. So the next one would be the Kate Andrews High School Fire Academy. So they've requested 10,000. Does anybody have any questions before we proceed further with that? Well, there's a few that we've left off to the side, so far we're looking at about 15,000 that we've approved. There's no any questions or comments. Who would be in favor of the 10,000? So there's 4 of us and 2 against, so we'll go ahead with that.
Just a question, so are they willing to clean the dog park for the money? Is that kind of like the labor will offset the $10,000 or?
Yes, I believe that was in the application, that is the, yeah.
You change your mind in favor of it now? There's 4 of us anyways,
Yeah,
so.
well, and I again, I'm not in favor of it, but purchasing equipment, what's equipment? Like, to me, it could be anything from a team t-shirt to a piece of fire hose, which we should be supplying as the co-sponsors of the program, to fire gear, which we should be sponsoring with the school, to a pair of safety boots. I don't know what is equipment. It's such a broad, is it a uniform? Is it like?
I believe it did state the PPE equipment, correct?
Yes.
So one set is $5,000 and a breathing apparatus is 6 or 7, so you don't even get one set for 10,000. So it's not PPE. Don't kid me. Yeah.
According to their letter, if we are successful in our application, the funds would be used towards purchasing equipment and supplies to run the fire academy. Yeah.
Through the chair, one other possible perspective, if we want to look at it as in kind, in like they are providing a service for residents in the form of cleaning up the dog park, is if council wanted to free up a little bit more flexibility with the community grant, we are under budget for our summer staff because we have greatly limited or diminished the amount of resources that were needed as a result of COVID. So council could draw from that surplus as a way to provide a donation toward the program in return for their in-kind service. I'm just throwing it out there if council wanted a little bit more breathing room. Another quick point of context, they were banking on a $50,000 grant through the province, and they had heard that they had received it for startup funding, only to find out that because of a eligibility criteria issue, they were declined for funds that they were told were approved. So they're trying to make that back up in the form of a series of donations, of which council through this program is one. There's a little bit more of that mountain that they have to climb. That $50,000 seed funding for the province that got taken away hurt badly.
So there was 4 people and 2 people, 4 people in favor and 2 people against. Is anybody changing their vote for the 10,000? Do you guys want to continue? You want to give it to them? Give it to them? Okay, so that's 10,000 too. So we're at about 25,000, just a little bit shy of it. So we still have the Cold Island District firefighters, Jenny Emery and R.I. Baker. Those are the 3 that are left. So that's about 30,000 right there, and we got 10. So does anybody have any suggestions on where to proceed from here?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I believe we should give then the Cold Island District Firefighters Association their 10, because again, agreeing with Councillor Holm and Councillor Paul, the other 2 should be going to the school division, and you know, hearing that another program got cut $50,000, maybe they can find 20,000 for the other 2 programs. So I think our last 10 should go to the Firefighters Association.
Suggestion, raise your hand. Okay. So as it looks, let's see if I got this right. Cold Island District firefighters will be 10,000. Cold Island Seniors Advisory Committee will be 2,317. Cold Island Copperheads 10,000. Gem of the West 2,500. And Kate Andrews High School's Fire Academy 10,000. Okay, would somebody like to make that motion and then also include
Sorry,
Mr. Hastings?
sorry to interrupt. Just I went back through the records, and the Copperheads did indeed receive the 10,000 for that score clock. So I just wanted to double check that. So they did submit their receipts, and I was just checking because last I had heard there was a delay in that. We did receive the extra money in January, February for the closeout report. So just that may or may not change where council's at, but I just wanted to correct on record what I previously thought I knew with respect to the 10,000 they received in past applications.
Just reading our minutes from that previous year, and the minutes do not reflect the Copperheads as receiving any of these grants.
Information, would anybody like to proceed with a motion as it was stated prior? Also, and then we'll make a second motion for the 2 high schools. So if nobody would like to make that motion, is there is there something that would like to be changed? Okay. Okay, so Councillor Holm will make the motion as per what we've given. All in favor? And then do you want to make the motion for the high schools? Councillor Avery?
Yeah, so I would like to make a motion that we support the Kate Andrews High School Graduation Committee with their $1,000 from our council fund, as well as Coldell Christian School for their graduating class if they're doing the same.
Favor? Thank you. Okay, thank you
very
Cindy.
much.
Was there a motion to do that then? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, Councillor Holm, all in favor? Against? No. Okay, good, thank you. Hope that went well. And then 7.5, we have that in the agenda. Relatively simple. Any thoughts? Councillor Lloyd?
I agree that we should do that, and I think we should redo it every year just so that it keeps in our minds. And maybe some year we can go back to what we used to do and have a celebration for the seniors, have a barbecue or something, but we used to have them at Kin Shelter.
So then Councillor Lloyd moves option number 2. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Pardon me? I represent that remark. Okay, and then we have 8.1, Coldell Public Library Librarians Report. Do you want to supplement anything, Councillor Simpson? Or?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I think that says it all. I guess there's any questions, otherwise I'll make a motion to receive for information.
Okay, we have Councillor Simpson moves for information. All in favor? And looks like we're done all the items on today's agenda. So entertain a motion to go into closed meeting. Councillor Pauls, all in favor? Yeah, that's good.